On the road to Kingston, New York, the other day, I was happy to see that the rains had returned and that the drought was ending. I stopped to do a little fishing along the way, and it reminded me of a fish I'd caught during the dry season. I'll tell you about it now. It took me a while to get over it. It was so dry that I could walk across the reservoir and the creeks. The water was shallow due to the drought, and most of the fish were swimming sideways so they could stay underwater. Then I saw a rather amazing sight. One fish was leaping from puddle to puddle, sometimes crawling across the dry land in between. I threw away my fishing pole and caught this fish with my bare hands, thinking of the delicious fish fry dinner that I would have that night. I put the fish in a bucket of water in the front seat of my car to keep it fresh during the long drive home. Every so often that fish would poke its head out of the water bucket and look at me, sometimes even trying to jump out. Finally, it did get out of the bucket and sat on the seat next to me. It was then that I realized that I could never eat this fish. About the same time, a brilliant idea struck me. I would train this fish to live out of water and make a pet out of it, as the fish seemed to already have inclinations in that direction. At home, I put the fish in a barrel of water, and sure enough, it tried to jump out. So, each morning I would take it out and put it on the grass, which was still wet from the dew. Then, when I could see that it had had enough, I would put it back in the barrel. Each day the fish seemed to last longer and longer outside the water barrel before getting listless. After a few months of this, the fish didn't need much water at all. As I walked along the road in the morning, it would wriggle along beside me in the wet grass in the shade. Later, when the day became really hot, I would give the fish a drink from my water jug. After a few more months of training, the fish was able to flop and sort of swim along down the middle of dusty roads. And when I offered it a drink, it refused. We even went to the beach together, of course. Only I went swimming. The fish just laid on the sand, getting a tan and enjoying the breeze. One day it was over 120 degrees and the fish just had to have a drink, so I gave it a dry beer. Other than that, the fish never touched water anymore, having become a land animal. What a lovable pet. It slept with me, saw movies with me, went out to parties with me, chased down tennis balls and brought them back to me, rode on the back of my bike, etc. We were inseparable. But then a tragedy happened. We were walking down the road together one day and passing over an old bridge. Suddenly my fish fell between some loose boards and on down into the creek below and drowned.
Have you ever heard of a fish that preferred land over water? Well, buckle up, because this tale is as real as the air you're breathing. Picture this. It's the dry season. The rivers have dwindled to mere trickles. The creeks are almost empty. And the fish? They're swimming sideways to stay submerged. But wait, what's that leaping from puddle to puddlet? Yes, a fish. A fish that seemed to have an unusual affinity for land. It didn't just swim, it hopped and crawled, jumping from one puddle to another. Now, any angler worth his salt wouldn't let a catch like this get away. So into the bucket it went, ready for a trip home. But this was no ordinary fish. It had a mind of its own, popping its head out of the bucket, looking around with what one could only describe as curiosity. Then the unthinkable happened. The fish jumped out of the bucket and sat next to me on the front seat. In that moment, I knew this fish was not meant for the frying pan. It was destined for something much grander. An idea sparked. What if this fish could be trained to live out of water? It seemed to already have a taste for terrestrial life. So began the experiment. Every morning the fish would be taken out of its water barrel and placed on the dewy grass. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the fish started staying longer on the grass without getting listless. Fast forward a few months, and we had a fish that refused to drink water, that could wriggle along the dusty roads and even lay on a sandy beach soaking up the sun. It had, for all intents and purposes, become a land animal. It was more than just a pet. It was a companion. It played fetch, went to parties, and even enjoyed a good movie. Life was perfect. Until one day, it wasn't. While crossing an old bridge, the fish fell through some loose boards into the creek below. The fish, once a creature of the water, now a creature of the land, drowned. And so, our tale concludes. A tale of a fish that tried to evolve beyond its species, of a man who tried to help it, and of a tragic end that reminds us of the delicate balance of nature. So the next time you see a fish leaping out of the water, remember this story. Remember the fish that almost evolved more. Remember, evolution is a slow process that takes millions of years, but in the end, it's all about survival, isn't it?